Hey guys, James Riley here from Goliath Historical Fencing Academy. Welcome back to the channel. Over the years at our school, we've developed several games that we play to develop core competencies in the art of the longsword. One of those games has to do very specifically with the winding tradition in Liechtenauer's art. There are lots of different interpretations as to what winding is, how to perform it competently, and where it belongs in the technical catalog of actions performed in competitive sparring. We have our interpretation. We're not here to suggest that everyone else should adopt this interpretation or change the way that they view winding or perform it in their own fencing. What we found is, through the development of our understanding, we've been able to hone both our winding practice and other aspects of our fencing. This is a dedicated winding game that we play. We focus on lots of aspects of our fencing, including footwork, body positioning, blade work, understanding blade pressure, working with feeling and sensitivity inside our opponent's actions, and specifically the core technical pieces of Liechtenauer's art, like mutieren, duplieren, absetzen, the schnitt or slice, and of course, winding itself. The rules of the game are pretty simple. Make blade contact with your opponent's sword, and keep in contact the entire time, with only two exceptions. From there, try and hit your opponent with your blade without getting hit by theirs. No hitter counts under any circumstances if the swords come unbound. Now, we didn't invent this game. In fact, it was one of the first games that I ever played when I started my HEMA journey over 15 years ago. What we have done is come up with a systematic way of approaching the game with regards to all types of geometry, blade configurations, movement patterns, and responses from our training partner, all the time observing key principles of swordsmanship and martial arts so that we could better understand the bind, better move, and better fence. This video is meant to be the most comprehensive breakdown that we could come up with of winding and the playing of this game, which we regard to be the best way to develop the core competencies involved in the art of winding. Let's get into it. First rule, blade positioning, maintaining an inside presence. As we're playing our game, we want to ensure that we recognize the cycles of offense and defense. Offensive cycles begin for us once we've obtained inside positioning with the blade. That means the point of the bind and the structure of the bind are pushing our training partner's sword outward from the center. We can establish and maintain inside positioning one of several different ways. We can either do so by taking in long point with the wrist, taking in plow by pulling our elbows and our wrists back to our torso, and taking in ox by stepping into their point as we lift our hilt towards their point and keep our sword pointed in the direction of the pressure of the bind. Once we've lost our inside position, it's vital that we recognize this and don't endeavor to maintain our offensive pressure. Without inside position, we can't safely push their sword outward as we target them, and so any attempt to strike at them from behind their sword leaves us vulnerable to their own attack. Instead, what we desire through this game is the development of tools to use when we're about to lose inside position to maintain it, either by binding on below our opponent's sword if they bind on from above, or binding on from above our opponent's sword if they bind on from below. Binding on is a strong action and requires direct lateral pressure through the entirety of the sword, especially the point. If their point is weak, it becomes very ineffective to change levels. Instead, we should ourselves strengthen when we notice that their point is insufficiently strong. Second rule, point positioning. There are two types of point positioning that we're going to be concerned with in this game. Either pointed directly towards our training partner, what we will regard as weak point structure, or alternatively, pointing towards the sword or the pressure of our training partner, what we will regard as strong point structure. When winding in a strong way, we must not point towards our training partner unless the bind and our training partner are directly in line. Regardless of whether or not we're pointing at our training partner or their sword, we never want to allow our point to drift higher than their head. Moving our hilt in front of our training partner's point might seem as an effective way to keep them from getting their point in towards us. But by taking our point out of position, it actually gives our training partner an opportunity to close distance in a way that we can't control. Instead, if we would be strong, whether that be to take in long point, or to wind to plow, or even to step into a strong ox, we want to maintain our point positioning so that it never extends past their shoulder or higher than their head. Third rule, body positioning. It's vital to keep both the bind and our target area inside the angle of our hips. In order to do this, when we seek to bind onto their sword and strengthen by stepping towards it, we need to step towards their sword with that foot in that direction, left to left and right to right. Once we've achieved this, and it's time to then begin our offense by targeting our training partner, we can then step with the other foot towards them. When stepping towards the bind, we should never use the far foot, as it takes our training partner, and therefore the target area, outside of the angle of our hips. Likewise, we never want to leave our hips so narrow that they can only be pointed at our training partner and not at the space that the bind is meant to control. In these cases, it's nearly impossible to use our strength to force our advantage. Fourth rule, changing sides when it's appropriate to durchwechseln. The point of this game is to learn pressure signals when we're in contact with our training partner's blade, and develop the sensitivity to respond with the correct corresponding action, whether their pressure is strong or weak, whether or not their point is high or low, or aimed directly towards us. In a broader fencing context, it's certainly appropriate to flee the bind. If someone overcommits their strength, or you catch them in a moment of strengthening, fleeing the bind to either durchwechseln or zucken, to hit or to take on the other side, is the appropriate action. In this case, though, we're looking to maintain control of the bind in its entirety, and so we need to come up with ways that we can both change sides and maintain our control. In the previous rule, we talked about how it's possible for our training partner to wind into a strong position, but then hold it and keep us behind their sword. If they never point towards us, then we never have an opportunity for ourselves to strengthen. If we are able to strengthen, it's often the case that our training partners have put their strong in front of our direct line of attack. In these cases, we want to change through and take inside position, either above or below, depending on where their hilt is. If their hilt is low, then we look to change sides by changing through and binding on from above. If their hilt is high, then we look to change sides by changing through and then binding on from below. Our primary goal in this exercise is to maintain strict adherence to all of the rules, ensuring that our point never deviates wide of their body or higher than their mask, always oriented towards them in either a strong way or in a weak way, and being very sensitive to the application of feeling and acting within their action. It can't be overstated how important it is that either fencer not be able to flee the bind whenever they're weak. If both players are allowed to change through, then it quickly reverts into a game where fleeing the bind is the strongest option. For this reason, we only allow changing through once you've obtained a strong position. If you find yourself with your strong in front of their weak, and their hilt is in the direct line of your action, then you can change through either above or below. Part 2. Hitters. The easiest hitter is a thrust in opposition, taking a strong position with the wrist, extending the arms towards the training partner, and stabbing through the structure of the bind. Against this, we can perform a defensive wind to plow. We can also wind offensively by moving into ox, lifting our hilt to their point, keeping our point forward, and then turning in towards them to begin our offense. In response to this, we can perform a defensive wind to ox, binding on from underneath their blade. Anytime we get our strong towards their weak, we can set our offense. If they wind to ox by lifting their hilt towards our weak, but don't maintain structure in their point, it's easy for us to wind to plow in response, and then mutate while their hands are high and their point is low. If, as we counterwind, our training partner continues to push our sword all the way through, we can continue to counterwind, starting from above, winding below, and then winding above again. If their point is strong, but forward enough for us to establish a strong position, we can durchwechseln to ox, take our strong position, and thrust from there. As we move our strong to their weak, they might try and maintain control of the bind by pulling their sword back. This is a prime opportunity to execute the duplieren or doubling technique. We can do this from above and from below. We can also do this after having changed through. We've talked about using the point to defend. The point needs to stay no higher than the mask, no wider than the shoulder. This gives our training partner an opportunity to bind on, either from above or below, and push our sword to the outside. But if we don't keep our point in the way of their blade, then it's easy for them to take control with the slice. If your opponent is denying you their point by bringing it too high or too wide for you to be able to take control, remain bound on their sword and slice in at the hands, face, or neck. Part 3. Strategy. The beauty of this game is not only that no one technique is superior to all other options, but also, and more so, that all counterplay to any particular technique can be done effectively at least 2 different ways. What this means is that anytime I perform an action compelling motion in my training partner, they have an opportunity to decide how they want to deal with it, and it becomes my responsibility to anticipate their response so that I can endeavor to get ahead of them. Opening the door for interactive play, where the decisions that I make have the power to influence the future choices of my training partner, but also have the power to betray my own intention, giving my training partner a window into my future choices. In this example, during a game that I played with David from Sellsword Arts, I allow my point to become weak, but David, having recognized the opportunity for Mutieren, is too late. Having knowledge of his intention, I provoke the Mutieren again, and this time, counterwind Indes to beat it. While our priority ought to be martial comportment and strict adherence to the rules of the game, the goal should be to be playing this interactive game, where the focus is rather on reading our training partner's intention and anticipating their actions. This gives us an opportunity to adapt with the appropriate counterplay to what we expect our training partner will do. It's always possible that we'll guess wrong, but every guess is an opportunity to develop the skills and abilities we need to be able to make those reads in a fencing context. That being said, the narrow set of available options for both us and our training partner make those reads much more manageable and much more accessible to someone with limited experience with this type of play. Finally, the goal of this exercise is to unlock core techniques within the Kunst des Fechtens catalog, techniques that have been heretofore elusive to the Liechtenauer community. This game gives us the precise pressure signals that compel these types of actions, and give us a real way of measuring our ability to perceive those moments and act with the correct action at the correct time in response to that. Thank you for making it this far into the video. If you'd like to learn more, our YouTube channel has dozens of hours of instructional content, several videos of which focus specifically on winding. But also, our channel strives to offer complete and coherent fencing philosophy and instruction. If you like what you've seen here, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing the video to anyone who you think would be interested, and checking out our Patreon page to support our efforts. We'll see you at the next video.